There are men who build empires with their hands, and there are men who destroy them with their hearts. Wealth can clothe the body in silk and gold, but it cannot always dress the soul in peace. In the city of Lagos, where the towers rose high and the streets hummed with the noise of ambition, there lived a man named Chukwudi Okafor, a billionaire whose name was spoken in boardrooms and broadcast on television screens across the nation. He was not born into riches. His story was one carved from sweat and vision, from nights spent awake and days spent negotiating. He had started with nothing but a dream and a battered notebook, and now he owned hotels, construction firms, and import companies that stretched from Port Harcourt to Abuja. His face was known, his wealth was visible, but his heart, some said, had grown cold in the process. Chukwudi was 53 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that still carried traces of the young man who once sold bottled water under the Lagos sun. He wore tailored suits that gleamed under fluorescent lights, Italian leather shoes that clicked against marble floors, and a wristwatch that cost more than most people earned in 5 years. But if you looked closely, past the expensive cologne and the polished exterior, you would see something missing in his eyes. A kind of tiredness, a kind of emptiness that no boardroom victory could fill. He had everything a man could want, yet he felt like he was chasing shadows. His wife was named Adaora. She was 48, soft-spoken and graceful, with skin the color of dark honey and eyes that still held warmth even after 26 years of marriage. She had been with him from the beginning, back when they lived in a single room in Surulere and cooked on a kerosene stove. She had believed in him when no one else did. She had prayed for him when banks refused him loans. She had stayed awake with him during those long nights when fear whispered that he would fail. And when success finally came, she had not changed. She still woke early to prepare his meals. She still attended church every Sunday. She still greeted the gateman with a smile and remembered the names of the house staff. Adora was the kind of woman who made a home feel like a sanctuary, not just a house filled with furniture, but Chukwudi had begun to wonder. In the quiet corners of his mind, doubt had planted itself like a weed. He had heard too many stories from his fellow businessmen, men who spoke in hushed tones over brandy about wives who only stayed for the money, men who claimed their partners smiled for the cameras but plotted in private, men who swore that love died the moment the bank account emptied. Chukwudi did not want to believe such things about Adaora, but the seed of suspicion, once planted, is difficult to uproot. He began to watch her more closely. He began to ask himself questions that had no answers. Did she love him, or did she love what he had become? Would she stand by him if everything disappeared? Would she remain if the man she married was stripped of his titles and his wealth? These questions haunted him. They kept him awake at night even when his body begged for rest. He would lie in their king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, while Adaora slept peacefully beside him, her breathing soft and steady. He envied her peace. He resented his own restlessness. And slowly, an idea began to form in his mind. It was a dangerous idea, the kind born from insecurity dressed as curiosity. He wanted to test her. He wanted to know beyond doubt whether her loyalty was rooted in love or convenience. And so, in the cold logic of a man who had spent decades solving problems, he devised a plan that would shake the foundation of their marriage. Chukwudi decided he would fake his own death. Not literally, of course, but legally and publicly. He would orchestrate his financial collapse, stage a scenario that would strip him of everything, and watch from the shadows to see how Adaora responded. Would she mourn him and move on, or would she fight for his memory? Would she sell his properties and remarry, or would she hold on to the life they built together? It was a twisted test, the kind only a man consumed by fear and pride could conceive. He told himself it was necessary. He convinced himself it was wise. But deep down, in the place where truth lives, he knew it was cruelty disguised as caution. He began his preparations carefully. Chukwudi was a man who understood systems, who knew how to manipulate paperwork and move money through channels that left no trace. He started transferring assets quietly, liquidating investments and hiding funds in offshore accounts under names that could not be traced back to him. He informed only one person of his plan, his younger brother named Obinna, a man who worked as his personal lawyer and had always been fiercely loyal. Obinna was shorter and rounder than Chukwudi, with a quick smile and a sharper mind than most people gave him credit for. When Chukwudi first explained the plan, Obinna stared at him as though he had lost his mind. "Brother, this is madness," Obinna said, his voice low and urgent. They were sitting in Chukwudi's private office, a room lined with bookshelves and certificates, the smell of leather and old wood hanging in the air. "You want to destroy your own life just to test your wife. What if she passes your test? What then? Will you come back and tell her it was all a game? Do you think she will forgive you?" Chukwudi leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. His face was calm, but his jaw was tight. "I need to know, Obinna. I need to know if she truly loves me or if she loves what I can give her. If I die tomorrow, will she remember me, or will she move on like I never existed?" Obinna shook his head slowly. "You are playing God, brother. You are testing a woman who has stood by you for more than 2 decades. This will not end well." But Chukwudi had made up his mind. And once a man decides to walk a path paved with pride, it is difficult to turn him back. Obinna, seeing that his brother would not be swayed, reluctantly agreed to help. Together, they crafted the illusion. Chukwudi began to make careless business decisions, ones that appeared reckless but were calculated to create the appearance of failure. He invested in ventures he knew would collapse. He took loans he had no intention of repaying properly. He started rumors through trusted contacts that his empire was crumbling. Slowly, the news began to spread. Investors grew nervous. Partners started distancing themselves. The media, always hungry for scandal, began to whisper about the fall of Chukwudi Okafor. At home, Adora noticed the change. She saw the stress etched into her husband's face, the way he snapped at the house staff, the way he spent hours locked in his office, refusing meals. She asked him what was wrong, her voice gentle and concerned, but he brushed her off with vague answers about market downturns and bad investments. She did not push. That was her way. She believed in giving him space, in trusting that he would come to her when he was ready. So she prayed. She prayed in the early mornings before the house woke, kneeling beside their bed with her Bible open, whispering petitions for her husband's peace and their family's protection. She did not know that the storm she was praying against was one he had created himself. The final stage of Chukwudi's plan came 6 months later. By then, the financial collapse appeared real. His companies were drowning in debt. His properties were being seized. His name, once golden, was now tarnished with failure. The media reported it with glee, the way vultures circle a carcass. Headlines screamed about the mighty fall of a billionaire. Former friends avoided his calls. Business associates sent polite but distant emails. And through it all, Chukwudi played his part perfectly, appearing broken and desperate in public while secretly moving his wealth into untouchable accounts. Then came the day he staged his death. Not a physical death, but a legal and social one. He orchestrated a final public appearance, a press conference where he admitted to financial ruin and announced he was stepping away from public life indefinitely. He looked gaunt and tired, his suit hanging looser than it should, his voice heavy with what seemed like genuine defeat. He spoke about failure and shame, about letting people down, about needing time to disappear and reflect. The performance was convincing. Even those who knew him well believed he was truly broken. And then he vanished. Chukwudi left Lagos in the middle of the night, driving alone to a small house he had purchased secretly in a quiet town called Ogbomoso, hours away from the city. It was a modest place, nothing like the mansions he was used to, with cement walls painted cream and a small veranda overlooking a dusty street. He told no one where he was going except Obinna, who would serve as his eyes and ears back in Lagos. The plan was simple. He would stay hidden for 6 months, watching from afar to see how Adaora responded to his absence, to see if she would grieve or celebrate, mourn or move on. What Chukwudi did not realize, as he settled into that small house with its creaking ceiling fan and unfamiliar silence, was that he had set in motion something he could not control. He had planted a seed of deception that would grow in ways he never anticipated. He had underestimated the strength of the woman he married, the depth of her love, and the cruelty of his own test. And in the quiet nights that followed, as he lay on a narrow bed far from home, he would begin to understand that some questions are better left unasked, and some tests destroy the very thing they seek to prove. Back in Lagos, Adaora woke the morning after her husband's disappearance to find his side of the bed empty. At first, she assumed he had left early for a meeting, as he sometimes did. But when she checked his office and found his desk cleared, his laptop gone, and a single handwritten note placed carefully on the polished wood surface, her heart began to race. The note was brief, written in his familiar, bold handwriting. It said only, "I am sorry, I have failed you and everyone. I need to go. Please forgive me. Do not look for me." Her hands trembled as she read it once, twice, 3 times, trying to make sense of the words. Failed? Go where? Forgive him for what? She called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She called Obinna, her voice shaking, and he arrived within the hour, his face carefully neutral, playing his role as the concerned brother who knew nothing. He read the note, shook his head gravely, and told her that Chukwudi had been under immense pressure, that the business failures had weighed on him heavily, that perhaps he needed time alone to clear his head. But where would he go? Adora asked, tears brimming in her eyes. Why would he leave like this without telling me? We have been together for 26 years. How can he just disappear? Obinna placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, though guilt twisted in his chest like a knife. Give him time, sister. He will come back when he is ready. He is probably just ashamed. You know how proud he is. But days turned into weeks, and Chukwudi did not return. Adora called everyone she could think of. Friends, business partners, distant relatives, but no one had seen him. She reported him missing to the police, though they were little help, dismissing it as a man running from debt. The media caught wind of his disappearance, and the headlines grew more sensational. Some speculated he had fled the country, others whispered about suicide. A few cruel voices suggested he had abandoned his wife for a younger woman. Through it all, Adaora held herself together with a dignity that astonished those who watched her. She did not crumble. She did not fall apart in public or rage against the rumors. Instead, she moved through each day with quiet determination, attending to the responsibilities her husband had left behind. She met with creditors, trying to negotiate payment plans, even though she had no access to his hidden funds. She sold her jewelry, her designer handbags, anything of value she owned, to settle what debts she could. She dismissed most of the house staff because she could no longer afford to pay them, keeping only the elderly gateman named Ezekiel and the housemaid named Ngozi, both of whom refused to leave her even when she could not guarantee their salaries. The mansion that had once hummed with life grew quieter. The cars were repossessed. The generator stopped running because there was no money for diesel. The satellite TV was disconnected. Adaora learned to cook simple meals with the little money she had, to wash clothes by hand, to live in a way she had not lived in decades. And through it all, she prayed. She prayed for her husband's safety, for his return, for clarity and strength. She did not understand why he had left, but she refused to believe he had stopped loving her. She clung to the hope that he was alive, that he would come back, that this was all some terrible mistake that would be corrected in time. In Ogbomoso, Chukwudi watched everything unfold through the reports Obinna sent him. His brother called weekly, updating him on Adaora's actions, her words, her struggles. At first, Chukwudi listened with clinical detachment, analyzing her behavior like a researcher studying data. He noted that she had not immediately tried to access his accounts, not that she could, since he had frozen her access before leaving. He noted that she had not sold the house, though selling it would have solved many of her problems. He noted that she spoke of him with sadness, not anger. But he told himself it was too early to draw conclusions. 6 months, he reminded himself. He needed to see what she would do over time. But as the weeks passed, something unexpected began to happen. Watching Adaora from afar, hearing about her sacrifices, seeing her strength in the face of abandonment, Chukwudi began to feel something he had not anticipated: shame. He watched her sell her belongings to pay his debts. He heard about her visits to the bank, her attempts to negotiate on his behalf, even when the bankers treated her with contempt. He learned that she had pawned her wedding ring, the ring he had saved for months to buy, the ring she had worn for 26 years without ever removing it. And when Obinna told him that Adora had been seen weeping quietly in church, her face buried in her hands as she prayed for her missing husband, something inside Chukwudi cracked. He began to pace the small house at night, unable to sleep, haunted by the image of his wife suffering because of a test he had designed. He had wanted to know if she loved him, and now he had his answer. But the answer came with a weight he had not expected. Adaora was not celebrating his absence. She was not planning a new life. She was fighting for the life they had built together, even when that life seemed to be falling apart. She was proving her love in the most painful way possible, and he was the one who had forced her into that position. Chukwudi began to realize that his test was not noble or wise. It was cruel. It was the action of a man so consumed by insecurity that he had hurt the one person who had never given him reason to doubt. He thought of the years they had spent together, the nights she had stayed awake with him, the way she had believed in him when he was nobody. He thought of her laughter, her prayers, her patience. And he understood, with a clarity that felt like a blade, that he had betrayed her trust in the worst possible way. But pride is a stubborn thing. Even as guilt gnawed at him, Chukwudi could not bring himself to end the charade. He told himself he needed to wait a little longer, to see the test through, to be absolutely certain. He convinced himself that returning too soon would undermine the purpose of his plan. But in truth, he was afraid. Afraid of facing Adaora. Afraid of admitting what he had done. Afraid that even if she forgave him, he would never forgive himself. Meanwhile, Adaora's situation grew more desperate. The creditors became more aggressive. Lawyers sent letters threatening legal action. The bank moved to foreclose on the mansion. She fought them with every tool she had, hiring a cheap lawyer who worked more out of pity than expectation of payment. She spent hours in his cramped office, explaining her situation, pleading for extensions, for mercy, for time. The lawyer, a middle-aged man named Segun with kind eyes and rumpled clothes, did what he could. But the system was not designed to favor people like her. One afternoon, after yet another fruitless meeting with the bank, Adora sat on a bench outside the building, her body heavy with exhaustion. The Lagos sun beat down mercilessly, and the street noise swirled around her. Honking cars, shouting vendors, the hum of a city that never stopped moving. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, her lips barely moving. God, if you are listening, please help me. I do not know what else to do. Please bring my husband back. Please let him be safe. Please give me strength. She did not notice the woman who sat down beside her until she spoke. Sister, are you all right? The voice was soft, concerned, and when Adaora opened her eyes, she saw a young woman in a faded dress, her hair wrapped in a simple scarf, her face open and kind. Adaora smiled weakly. I am fine, my dear. Just tired. The woman studied her for a moment, then reached into her worn bag and pulled out a bottle of water. Here, drink this. You look like you need it. Adaora hesitated, then accepted the water gratefully, unscrewing the cap and taking a long sip. The woman watched her with gentle eyes. Whatever you are going through, she said quietly, God has not forgotten you. Sometimes the storm is longest just before the blessing comes. Adaora looked at her, surprised by the sudden wisdom in those words, and felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I needed to hear that. The woman smiled and stood, smoothing her dress. My name is Temi. If you ever need someone to talk to, I attend the church on Bishop Street. You are always welcome. And then she walked away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving Adora with a strange sense of peace. That night, Adora knelt beside her bed and prayed with renewed faith. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but she chose to believe that she was not alone. She chose to trust that even in the darkest valley, there was a hand guiding her, a voice calling her forward. And she made a decision. No matter what happened, she would not give up. She would fight for her husband's name, for their marriage, for the life they had built together. Even if he never came back, she would honor what they had shared. In Ogbomoso, Chukwudi received another call from Obinna. His brother's voice was tight, strained. Brother, you need to end this. Adaora is struggling. The bank is taking the house. She is running out of money. She is not eating properly. I see her growing thinner every time I visit. This has gone too far. Chukwudi sat in the dim light of his small living room, the phone pressed to his ear, his chest tight with emotion. "What else is she doing?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "She is fighting," Obinna said simply. "She is fighting for you, even though you are not there. She is defending your name. She is refusing to speak ill of you, even when people tell her she should move on. Brother, she loves you. She has proven it 1,000 times over. Please come home." Chukwudi closed his eyes, and for the first time since this whole terrible plan began, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he had done. He had wanted proof of love, and he had received it in abundance, but the proof had come at a cost he had not calculated. He had wounded the woman he loved, tested her beyond reason, and in doing so, he had revealed not her weakness, but his own. He wanted to go home. He wanted to walk through the door, take Adaora in his arms, and beg for her forgiveness. But fear held him back. Fear that she would reject him. Fear that the damage was too great to repair. Fear that he had destroyed the one good thing in his life. "Give me one more week," he told Obinna, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just one more week." But that week would bring events that Chukwudi could not have predicted, events that would force his hand and change everything. Because while he sat in hiding, nursing his guilt and his pride, Adora was making decisions of her own, decisions born from strength and faith, decisions that would reveal the true measure of her character. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Tuesday morning. Adora stood in the driveway of the mansion, holding the official document in her hands, reading the cold, legal language that informed her she had 30 days to vacate the property. 30 days to leave the home where she had raised her children, where she had celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, where she had built a life with a man who had now vanished. The paper trembled in her grip, but she did not cry. She had no tears left. Instead, she folded the notice carefully, placed it in her handbag, and walked back into the house. Ezekiel, the gateman, watched her from his post, his weathered face creased with concern. He had worked for the Okafor family for 15 years, and he had seen both the rise and the fall. He had watched Chukwudi drive away that night 6 months ago. Though he had said nothing to anyone, he had watched Adaora struggle with grace and dignity, and his respect for her had only deepened. "Madam," he called out gently as she passed, "are you all right?" Adaora paused and turned to him, forcing a smile. "I am fine, Ezekiel. God is still in control." He nodded slowly, though his eyes were sad. "Madam, if you need anything, even if I have only small money, I will give it to you." Her smile became genuine, warmed by his kindness. "Thank you, Ezekiel. Your loyalty means more than money." Inside the house, Ngozi was sweeping the living room floor, her movements slow and methodical. She looked up when Adaora entered, reading the expression on her employer's face. "Bad news, Ma?" she asked quietly. Adaora sank into one of the remaining chairs, the few pieces of furniture that had not yet been sold or seized. "They are taking the house, Ngozi. We have 30 days. Ngozi stopped sweeping, her hands tightening around the broom handle. "Where will you go?" "I do not know yet," Adaora admitted, "but I will find somewhere. And Ngozi, you do not have to stay with me any longer. I cannot pay you properly. You should find work with another family." Ngozi shook her head firmly. "I am not leaving you, Ma. You took care of me when my mother was sick. You paid for her hospital bills when I had nothing. I will not abandon you now." Adaora felt a lump rise in her throat. In the midst of loss, she was discovering who truly cared for her, who truly valued her beyond what she could offer. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for your faithfulness." That evening, Adaora sat alone in the living room as darkness fell. The power had been cut weeks ago, so she lit a candle and placed it on the table beside her. The flickering light cast shadows on the walls, dancing ghosts of a life that used to be. She opened her Bible, the pages worn from years of reading, and let it fall open to a random passage. Her eyes landed on words that seemed to speak directly to her situation. "The Lord is close to the broken-hearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." She read the verse again, letting it sink into her bones, and a strange peace settled over her. She realized that even though she was losing her home, even though her husband had abandoned her, even though the future was uncertain, she was not destroyed. She was broken-hearted, yes, but not broken. She was crushed, but not defeated. And in that moment, she made a vow to herself and to God. She would not let bitterness take root in her heart. She would not curse her husband or wish him harm. She would continue to pray for him, to hope for him, to believe that somewhere, somehow, he would find his way back. The next morning, Adaora began the process of packing. There was not much left to pack, truth be told. Most of their belongings had been sold. She moved through the rooms slowly, touching the walls, remembering the moments that had filled this space. She remembered the day they had moved in, how Chukwudi had carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing with joy. She remembered her children running through these halls, their voices echoing, filling the house with life. She remembered quiet evenings with her husband, sitting together in comfortable silence, his hand resting on hers. The memories were bittersweet, but she held on to them. They were proof that love had existed here, that happiness had been real, even if it felt distant now. And she refused to let the pain of the present erase the beauty of the past. While Adaora packed, Chukwudi's resolve was finally crumbling. Obinna had stopped calling him with updates and had instead sent a text message that was blunt and unforgiving. "Brother, I cannot be part of this anymore. Adaora is being evicted. She is losing everything because of you. If you do not come back now and fix this, I will tell her the truth myself. You have 1 week." Chukwudi stared at the message for a long time, his hands shaking. The reality of what he had done crashed over him like a wave. He had not just tested his wife, he had destroyed her life. He had taken the woman who loved him unconditionally and subjected her to months of suffering, all because of his own insecurity. He had been so focused on proving her loyalty that he had failed to see how his test revealed his own lack of trust, his own failure as a husband. He stood up abruptly, pacing the small room, his mind racing. He needed to go back. He needed to stop this. But how could he face her? What could he possibly say to justify what he had done? Would she even want him back, or would she look at him with the disgust he deserved? As he wrestled with these questions, his phone rang. It was a number he did not recognize, a Lagos number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, female, hesitant. "Is this Mr. Chukwudi Okafor?" "Who is asking?" he said carefully. "My name is Temi. I met your wife a few weeks ago. She does not know I am calling you. I got your number from someone who used to work for you. I am calling because I think you should know what she is doing." Chukwudi's heart began to pound. "What do you mean? Is she all right?" Temi hesitated, then spoke quickly, as though afraid she would lose her courage. "She is physically fine, but she is struggling. She is about to lose your house. But that is not why I am calling. I am calling because I have been watching her, and I think you should know the kind of woman you married. She could have spoken badly about you. She could have told everyone how you abandoned her. But she has not. She defends you. She tells people you were a good man who faced hard times. She prays for you every single day. I have never seen faith like hers. And sir, if you are out there somewhere, if you left her on purpose or by mistake, you need to come back. Because women like her do not come around often." The line went silent. Chukwudi could not speak. His throat had closed, and tears were streaming down his face. He had spent 6 months testing his wife, and in those 6 months she had proven herself in ways he could never have imagined. She had not just passed his test, she had transcended it, showing a kind of love and faithfulness that put his own to shame. "Thank you," he finally managed to whisper. "Thank you for calling." He ended the call and sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. He wept for the first time in decades, deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place he had long kept locked away. He wept for his pride, for his foolishness, for the pain he had caused. And he wept for the woman who had loved him despite everything, who had remained faithful when he had given her every reason to walk away. When the tears finally subsided, Chukwudi stood up, his decision made. He would go home. He would confess everything. He would beg for forgiveness, knowing he might not receive it. And he would spend the rest of his life trying to be the man Adaora deserved, the man he should have been all along. He packed quickly, throwing his few belongings into a bag. He called Obinna. "I am coming back. Tonight. I need you to meet me at the house tomorrow morning. I am going to tell her everything. Obinna's relief was palpable. "Thank God, brother. It is about time." Chukwudi drove through the night, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his mind replaying every moment of the past 6 months. The road from Ogbomoso to Lagos was long and dark, lit only by his headlights and the occasional street lamp. He drove in silence, no radio, no distractions, just the hum of the engine and the weight of his thoughts. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, he entered the outskirts of Lagos. The city was waking up, vendors setting up their stalls, early commuters beginning their journeys. Chukwudi felt like a stranger in a place he had once ruled. He drove past the landmarks he knew, the buildings that bore his name, the construction sites that had made him wealthy. All of it felt hollow now. He arrived at the mansion just as the sun fully rose. The gate was open, and he drove in slowly, his heart pounding. The compound looked different, emptier. The flowers Adora used to tend had withered. The lawn was overgrown. The fountain in the center of the driveway had run dry. It was a picture of neglect, a mirror of what his absence had caused. He parked the car and sat for a moment, gathering his courage. Then he stepped out and walked toward the front door. It was slightly ajar, and he pushed it open, stepping into the house that used to be his home. The interior was sparse, most of the furniture was gone. The walls, once decorated with paintings and photographs, were bare. His footsteps echoed in the emptiness. "Adaora," he called out, his voice cracking. There was no answer. He walked through the living room, the dining room, calling her name. Panic began to rise in his chest. What if she had already left? What if he was too late? Then he heard a sound from upstairs, the soft shuffle of footsteps. He climbed the staircase, his legs heavy, and followed the sound to their bedroom. The door was open, and there she was. Adaora stood by the window, her back to him, folding clothes and placing them into a small suitcase. She was thinner than he remembered, her frame more fragile, but she moved with the same quiet grace. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she wore a faded dress that had seen better days. For a moment, Chukwudi could not speak. He could only stare at her, overwhelmed by love and guilt, and the unbearable knowledge of what he had done. She must have sensed his presence because she turned slowly, and when she saw him standing in the doorway, her hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes widened, filling with tears, and for a long moment neither of them moved. They simply stood there, separated by a few feet of space and 6 months of pain. "Chukwudi," she whispered, as though afraid he was a ghost, a trick of her tired mind. "It is me," he said, his voice breaking. "I am here." "I am so sorry, Adaora. I am so sorry." She took a step toward him, then stopped, her face a mixture of shock, relief and confusion. "Where have you been? I thought you were dead. I thought I had lost you. Why did you leave? Why did you not tell me?" He wanted to lie. He wanted to make up a story, to tell her he had been kidnapped or lost his memory, or any other excuse that would spare him the shame of the truth. But he could not anymore. She deserved the truth, no matter how ugly it was. "I tested you," he said, the words falling from his lips like stones. "I faked my collapse. I hid my money. I disappeared to see if you would stay loyal, to see if you truly loved me. I wanted to know if you would remain faithful if everything was taken away. And I watched from afar while you suffered because of my pride and my foolishness. I am a wicked man, Adaora. I do not deserve your forgiveness. But I am here to tell you the truth, because you deserve at least that." The silence that followed was suffocating. Adaora stared at him, her face unreadable, her body completely still. Chukwudi waited, bracing himself for her anger, for her tears, for her rejection. He deserved all of it and more. But what came next surprised him. Adaora did not scream, she did not slap him or curse him. Instead, she sank slowly onto the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, and she looked at him with eyes that held a depth of pain he had never seen before. "You tested me," she repeated softly, as though trying to understand the words. "You made me believe you were gone. You let me cry for you, pray for you, fight for you. You watched me lose everything and did nothing, all because you wanted to see if I loved you." "Yes," he said, his voice barely audible. And I know now how wrong I was. I know I hurt you in ways I can never repair. But Adaora, you passed. You proved your love 1,000 times over. You are the most faithful, most loving person I have ever known. And I am the fool who did not see it until now. She looked down at her hands, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. You broke my heart, Chukwudi, she said quietly. Not because you left, but because you did not trust me. After 26 years, you still doubted my love. That is what hurts the most. He fell to his knees in front of her, his pride shattered, his defenses gone. I know. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn back your trust. I will give you back everything I took. I will restore what I destroyed. Just please, Adaora, please give me a chance to make this right. She looked at him for a long time, her eyes searching his face. And then, slowly, she reached out and placed her hand on his head, a gesture so tender it broke him all over again. I forgive you, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. Not because you deserve it, but because I cannot carry this bitterness in my heart. I forgive you, Chukwudi. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It will take time to rebuild what you destroyed. It will take time for me to trust you again. He grasped her hand, pressing it to his face, his tears wetting her fingers. I will wait as long as it takes. I will do whatever it takes. And in that moment, in the emptiness of a house that had once been filled with wealth and now held only the fragile hope of redemption, something began to heal. It was not complete. It was not easy. But it was a beginning. Over the following weeks, Chukwudi worked to undo the damage he had caused. He met with Obinna and his financial team, liquidating the offshore accounts and transferring the money back into accessible funds. He paid off every debt, compensated every creditor, and stopped the foreclosure on the mansion. He rehired the staff, restored the utilities, and slowly brought the house back to life. But more importantly, he worked to rebuild his relationship with Adaora. He did not expect her to welcome him back with open arms, and she did not. She was kind but cautious, speaking to him with politeness, but keeping an emotional distance. She slept in a separate bedroom. She ate meals with him, but did not linger afterward. She allowed him into her space, but did not let him back into her heart, not yet. Chukwudi accepted this. He understood that trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. So he showed up every day, not with grand gestures, but with small, consistent acts of love. He woke early to prepare her tea the way she liked it. He asked about her day and listened without interrupting. He attended church with her, sitting quietly beside her as she prayed. He learned to serve her in ways he had forgotten during the years of wealth and distraction. One evening, 3 months after his return, they sat together on the veranda, watching the sun set over Lagos. The sky was painted in shades of gold and crimson, and the air was warm and still. Adora was reading her Bible, and Chukwudi sat beside her, simply being present. After a while, she closed the book and looked at him. "Why did you really do it?" she asked. "What made you so afraid that you felt you had to test me?" He thought carefully before answering. "I think I was afraid that I was not enough," he said slowly. "I had built this empire, and I thought that was what made me valuable. I thought that without the wealth, without the success, I would be nothing. And I was afraid that you felt the same way, that you loved what I had become, rather than who I was. I did not trust that I was worthy of love just as I am." Adaora nodded, her expression softening. "You were always enough, Chukwudi. Even when we had nothing, you were enough. I did not marry your money. I married you. And I stayed because I loved you, not because of what you could give me. But you could not see that because you had stopped seeing yourself." Her words settled into him, a truth he had needed to hear. "I see it now," he said, "and I see you. I see the woman who stood by me, who fought for me, who loved me even when I did not deserve it. I will never take that for granted again." She reached over and took his hand, her touch warm and familiar. "We cannot change the past, Chukwudi, but we can choose what we do with the future. I have forgiven you, and I am willing to try again. But I need you to promise me something." "Anything," he said. "Promise me that you will never test my love again. Promise me that you will trust me even when it is hard. Promise me that we will face whatever comes together with honesty and faith." "I promise," he said, his voice firm. "I will spend the rest of my life being the husband you deserve." She smiled then, the first real smile he had seen from her since his return, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then let us start from here," she said, "not from where we were, but from where we are now." And they did. Slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild. They talked more than they ever had, sharing fears and hopes and dreams. They prayed together, seeking guidance and healing. They rediscovered the small joys they had forgotten, walking hand in hand, laughing over shared memories, sitting in comfortable silence. It was not perfect. There were moments of tension, moments when Adaora's hurt surfaced and Chukwudi's guilt returned. But they did not run from those moments. They faced them, worked through them, and grew stronger because of them. Chukwudi also changed the way he did business. He became more ethical, more generous, more mindful of the people affected by his decisions. He used his wealth not just to build his empire, but to help others, funding scholarships, supporting small businesses, and investing in his community. He learned that true success was not measured by what he accumulated, but by what he gave away. 1 year after his return, on their 27th wedding anniversary, Chukwudi planned a quiet celebration. No grand party, no extravagant gifts, just the two of them and a simple dinner in their home. He cooked the meal himself, something he had never done before, and though it was far from perfect, Adaora laughed and ate every bite. After dinner, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Adora looked at him, surprised. "What is this?" "Open it," he said. She opened the box and found her wedding ring, the one she had pawned months ago to pay his debts. He had tracked it down, bought it back, and had it cleaned and polished until it shone like new. "I know it is just a ring," he said softly, "but it represents something I should never have allowed you to lose. It represents us, our commitment, our love. I am giving it back to you, not because I bought it, but because you earned it. You kept your vows even when I broke mine. You stayed faithful even when I was not. This ring belongs on your finger, and I hope you will wear it again." Adaora's eyes filled with tears as she took the ring from the box and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had never left. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for choosing us." He took her hand, holding it gently. "I will choose us every single day for the rest of my life." They sat together in the warm glow of the candlelight, and for the first time in a long time, they both felt whole. The journey had been painful, the lessons hard, but they had emerged on the other side with a love that was deeper, more resilient, and more real than it had ever been. And as the night drew to a close, Chukwudi thought back to the man he had been 6 months ago, the man who had believed that love could be tested and measured like a business transaction. He understood now how foolish that belief had been. Love was not something to be tested. It was something to be cherished, nurtured, and protected. It was a gift, freely given, and the only way to honor that gift was to give it freely in return. He looked at Adaora, at the woman who had walked through fire for him, and he made a silent vow. He would never again take her love for granted. He would never again let pride or fear drive him to hurt the people he cared about. He would live with gratitude, with humility, with the knowledge that the greatest wealth he possessed was not in his bank account, but in the heart of the woman sitting beside him. In the months and years that followed, their story became a quiet testimony in their community. People who had watched their fall and witnessed their restoration spoke of them with respect. They became an example of what true commitment looked like, of what it meant to honor vows not just in good times, but in the hardest seasons. They were proof that broken things could be mended, that trust could be rebuilt, and that love, when genuine, could survive even the cruelest tests. Chukwudi never forgot the lesson he had learned. He carried it with him every day, a reminder that the value of a person is not found in what they own, but in who they are and how they love. He had been given a second chance, and he did not waste it. He poured his energy into being present, into being kind, into being the kind of man who deserved the grace he had been given. And Adora, for her part, chose to move forward without bitterness. She did not hold his past mistakes over him or use them as weapons in moments of conflict. She had forgiven him fully, and she allowed that forgiveness to set them both free. She continued to pray, to believe, to love with the same steadfast faith that had carried her through the darkest days. She was a living example of resilience, of strength wrapped in gentleness, of a spirit that refused to be broken by betrayal. Their children, who had been away during the worst of the crisis, returned home and witnessed the transformation in their parents. They saw a father who had been humbled and a mother who had been honored. They saw a marriage that had been tested and had emerged stronger. And they learned lessons about love, forgiveness, and faithfulness that no classroom could have taught them. As time passed, Chukwudi and Adora began to share their story, not for fame or recognition, but to help others who were struggling in their own relationships. They spoke at marriage seminars, at church gatherings, in small living rooms filled with couples who needed hope. They were honest about their failures and their pain, but they always ended with the message that healing was possible, that restoration was real, and that God could take even the most broken situations and bring beauty from them. People listened, not because Chukwudi was wealthy or because Adaora was eloquent, but because their story was real. It was not polished or perfect. It was raw and honest, and full of the kind of truth that resonates with anyone who has ever loved and been hurt, who has ever failed and sought redemption, who has ever wondered if broken trust could be repaired. And through it all, they held on to each other. They learned that marriage was not about finding a perfect person, but about choosing to love an imperfect person perfectly. They learned that strength was not the absence of struggle, but the decision to keep fighting even when the road was hard. They learned that the deepest love was not the kind that never faced challenges, but the kind that rose to meet them again and again with courage and grace. One Sunday afternoon, 5 years after Chukwudi's return, they sat together in their living room, now refurnished and filled once again with warmth and life. The house had been restored, but more importantly, so had they. Adaora was knitting, her hands moving with practiced ease, and Chukwudi was reading a newspaper, occasionally glancing up to watch her, a small smile playing on his lips. "What are you smiling at?" she asked without looking up. "You," he said simply. "I was just thinking about how blessed I am." She looked at him then, her eyes twinkling. "It took you long enough to realize it." He laughed, a deep, genuine sound. Better late than never. She set down her knitting and moved to sit beside him on the couch. "Do you ever think about that time?" she asked quietly. "About what happened?" "Every day," he admitted, "not with regret anymore, but with gratitude. Because as painful as it was, it taught me things I needed to learn. It showed me who you really are. It showed me who I needed to become." She rested her head on his shoulder. "I think about it too, and I am grateful for where we are now. But I would not want to go through it again." "Neither would I," he said, wrapping his arm around her. "Never again." They sat in silence, content in each other's presence, two people who had walked through fire and come out refined. They had learned that love was not about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up, day after day, even when it was hard. It was about choosing each other over and over again in the small, quiet moments that no one else saw. As the sun set outside, casting golden light through the windows, Chukwudi whispered a prayer of thanks. He thanked God for Adaora, for her faithfulness, for her strength. He thanked God for the hard lessons, for the opportunity to change, for the grace that had covered them both. And he asked for the wisdom to never take any of it for granted, to honor the gift he had been given every single day. Adaora, sensing his prayer, joined him, adding her own words of gratitude. They prayed together, as they had learned to do, their voices blending into one. And in that moment, they were not just husband and wife. They were partners, warriors, survivors of a battle that had tested them to their core and revealed the unbreakable foundation of their love. The years continued to pass, and Chukwudi and Adaora grew old together. Their hair turned grey, their steps became slower, but their bond only deepened. They watched their children marry and have children of their own, and they passed down the lessons they had learned through hard-won experience. They spoke, often about the importance of trust, about the danger of pride, about the power of forgiveness. They taught their grandchildren that true wealth was not found in possessions, but in relationships, in integrity. in the legacy of love left behind. And when people asked them the secret to a lasting marriage, they always gave the same answer. Choose love, even when it is difficult. Choose forgiveness, even when it hurts. Choose to believe the best in each other, even when doubt creeps in. Choose to stay, even when leaving seems easier. Because love, real love, is not a feeling that comes and goes. It is a decision made again and again in the face of every challenge, every disappointment, every fear. Chukwudi never again tested his wife. He learned that trust was not something to be proven, but something to be given and received freely. He learned that the greatest gift he could offer Adaora was not his wealth or his protection, but his vulnerability, his honesty, his willingness to be fully known and fully loved. And Adora, for her part, never stopped being the woman she had always been, faithful, strong, gracious. She did not change to fit someone else's expectations. She did not harden her heart to protect herself from future pain. She remained open, trusting, believing that love was worth the risk. And in doing so, she became a beacon of hope for everyone who knew her, a living testament to the power of unwavering faith. Their story became the kind people whispered about with reverence. It was the story shared at weddings, used to encourage struggling couples, told to children as an example of what real commitment looked like. It was not a fairy tale with a perfect ending. It was a real-life drama with scars and struggles and moments of doubt. But it was also a story of redemption, of healing, of two people who refused to give up on each other even when everything seemed lost. And so, in the end, Chukwudi Okafor, the billionaire who had once faked his own downfall to test his wife, learned the most important lesson of his life: that the truest measure of a person is not found in what they can take or what they can prove, but in what they can give and how they choose to love. He learned that wealth could be rebuilt, empires could rise and fall, but a faithful heart was a treasure beyond price. He learned that Adaora had never needed to be tested, because her love had been evident all along in the quiet, consistent ways she had lived her life. And he learned that the greatest failure was not in falling, but in refusing to get back up and make things right. As for Adaora, she learned that forgiveness was not weakness, but the highest form of strength. She learned that love did not mean accepting mistreatment, but it did mean offering grace when grace was needed. She learned that her worth was not defined by her husband's actions or society's judgments, but by the character she chose to embody every single day. Together, they built a legacy that outlasted their wealth, a legacy written not in bank statements or property deeds, but in the lives they touched, the people they helped, the love they shared. And when their time on earth came to an end, they left behind a story that would be told for generations, a story that reminded people that no matter how far you fall, no matter how badly you fail, redemption is always possible if you are willing to humble yourself, seek forgiveness, and do the work to make things right. Because in the end, life is not about the tests we impose on others, but about the choices we make when faced with our own failures. It is about whether we choose pride or humility, bitterness or forgiveness, fear or love. And the Okafors chose love. Again and again, in ways big and small, they chose love. And that choice made all the difference.